Zoning Board meeting. Let's please rise for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to our April 11th Zoning Board meeting. To your far right, we have Mr. Joseph DiVenuto, Mr. Gary Kestenbaum, Mr. Kevin Abrams, Mr. Andrew Giacomazza. I'm Karen Unger, and when our attorney comes, it will be Mr. Michael Donnelly. Our recording secretary is Ms. Jessica McLennan. We have no executive session tonight. Has anybody read the minutes from the previous month?
Move to approve them.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We have no new business. The action on decisions. The first decision is the, oh boy, Kukurzik. I hope I say that correct. All right. Review decision for an area variance to permit the installation of a 6-foot-high solid chain link fence in a front yard pursuant to Section 146-5B and 146-7A. A 6-foot-high solid fence is not permitted in a front yard. Said property is located in the R3A zoning district at 1 Troutbrook Road in Highland Mills, is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 201, Block 1, Lot 19.2. After several pages of facts and findings, our decision is as follows. In employing the balancing test set forth in the village law, Section 7-712-B, letter C, the board hereby grants the variance as requested upon the following conditions. 1, this approval is not granted in a vacuum, but is rather one of 3 independent yet interconnected approvals, the others being within the jurisdiction of the village building inspector and the Orange County Department of Public Works. As such, this grant of variance is conditioned upon approval of the proposed fence plans by those agencies. Number 2, this approval is subject to the further review and final approval of the fence plans by the Orange County Department of Public Works. Should the Orange County Department of Public Works require changes in either the location or configuration of the fence from what is shown on the plans that require greater or different variances, the applicant must return to the zoning board for further review. Number 3, this application is not decided in a vacuum, but is rather, as noted above, tied to a specific application for approval of a permit pending before the village building inspector and the Orange County Department of Public Works. Therefore, this approval is conditioned upon the applicant diligently pursuing his application before those agencies. This grant of variance, unless extended, shall expire if a permit for the proposed fence is not obtained by the applicant within 90 days from the date of the decision. Do I have a motion to adopt the decision as read?
I make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Joe, how do you vote?
I vote aye. Gary?
Gary?
Aye.
Sorry. Kevin?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So the decision is, yes, thank you very much. Sorry. we just- I'll give this to Jeff. Okay. Second decision, Highland Lake Estates Homeowners Association interpretation decision for the proposed installation of a 6-foot-high chain link fence along the northwest property line pursuant to Section 146-5A and B. A 6-foot-high fence is only permitted in a rear yard. Said property is located in the R2A zoning district within the Highland Lakes Estate subdivision and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 245, Block 1, Lot 179. Once again, after several pages of facts and findings, the decision of the board is this. This board thus concludes that, 1, a corporate homeowners association has the same privilege to erect a fence that complies with Chapter 146 of the Code of the Village of Woodbury as does an individual property owner. Number 2, A perimeter area of the applicant's common area land is residential land located generally behind the homes within that development and thus constitutes a rear yard within the meaning of Chapter 146, fences, of the Code of the Village of Woodbury. And number 3, this interpretation does not itself authorize construction of a fence. Erection of the proposed fence must first be approved by the Village of Woodbury building inspector. Do I have a motion to accept the decision as written?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Joe, how do you vote?
Madam Chair, excuse me.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Discussion on the
You want?
motion? I
Okay, I'm
apologize.
sorry, Gary, go ahead.
I had a question for Mike. Mike, the one thing I think that's, several things are disturbing me. The first thing is, on page 8 of the latest version that you wrote, it says, "Members of the public have also suggested that erection of this fence will violate a condition of the Planning Board 1990 resolution of approval." Was that fact brought up in the
Public hearing?
Contagio letter?
Yes, yes.
Were you aware of that? Were any of us aware of that before the Contagio letter?
I don't believe so, no.
I have a process problem with that. The process problem is that information was brought to us from the quote-unquote, the public.
After the closing of the
I'm looking at
public
him as
hearing.
the public, not as a member of the planning board. And from a standpoint of law, I'm concerned that the public then gave us information with the public hearing closed, and the rest of the public hasn't had a chance to digest or comment on that, yet here it is, and now we're voting on it. I'm concerned that's an automatic Article 78 win.
Well, I think you are free to reject it because it came after the hearing, or the public hearing is the time when you must consider public comment. You are free to consider public comment at other times, so you could receive it. And thirdly, you could, if you thought it was appropriate, reopen the hearing to see if there's further comment on that issue that is important to you. I think you have those three options.
Well, my first comment then is that I'm throwing that out to the board to consider reopening the public hearing.
I'm
even
not
though
in favor of
You want to
that.
cut me off?
Sure.
That's okay. I'll wait till you're done.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Gary. Kevin will wait.
My thought is to throw out to the board to reopen the public hearing as a point of fairness, just to let people understand what that document was, digest it, and respond to it. By not allowing that, you don't give anybody the opportunity to say, wait a minute, you heard that somebody said that that document represented the current site plan. How do we know that that's the current site plan and that it's approved and filed? We have no independent
Well,
corroboration
then
of that.
just take it out.
We just have somebody saying it. That's number one.
But first of all, it's after the fact.
I agree.
So then just take it out of this and let's move forward with it.
Are you saying remove the wording?
Yeah, take the wording out if that's the problem.
He's referring
You're
to
to
wording.
page
I can't see reopening a public hearing over this. The person that, Mr. Cottagio was here at the last meeting, he had the opportunity to talk then.
I don't disagree with that.
Don't come to me 2 days before the meeting and say, well, look at all this information I gave you.
I don't
Wasn't 2 days,
disagree.
it was the day before the meeting.
No, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm just speaking from a standpoint of fairness and law. I'm not speaking from one side or the other. I'm just speaking from a standpoint of fairness. It sets a precedent that the board will consider information after the public hearing is closed. And I'm just throwing
Okay,
that out.
I don't think that we're considering information after the public hearing is closed. Are you okay with removing that section from the decision?
Well,
That section,
sure.
the added
Sure,
section?
that would be one way to,
Okay, does everyone understand what we're talking about here?
Yes.
Removing the new section? Okay, do we have then a motion
The se-
to,
sorry.
more
The se-
discussion?
yes.
Sorry, Gary.
The second point that I wanted to make, Mike, was that this is no longer a request for a decision on a variance, it's an interpretation.
Correct.
And that interpretation, in my opinion, should be not applicant-specific. It should essentially state that a homeowners, in our opinion, in the board's opinion,
Well, it
a homeowners association has all the rights and privileges and standing as an individual, except for the fact that in the case of an individual, there's no site plan for a person's home. But there is a site plan for a broader development. So all I would say is to put language in here that says an HOA, duly elected representative, has the same rights and standing
He does
as
have
a,
that in there, I believe.
I think that.
Yeah, I believe
as a
that's in there.
homeowner, but
Right there in line 1.
instead of the language on page 8, Mike, which is applicant-specific, I would say put in there generic language that says, but they do have the duty to abide by any current site plan that is filed with the county. And that would make it generic and inspecific. That's all I wanted to bring up, sorry.
Okay, I
We're
thought the
not
language
authorized-
was generic. It says, "A corporate homeowners association has the same privilege to erect a fence that complies with Chapter 146 of the code as does an individual property owner."
And we're not actually authorizing the construction of a fence.
We make that
Correct.
explicit.
Correct.
We're just pushing it back to the building department.
Correct.
So-
That's number 3 in the.
Right.
So we're not giving a variance for a fence.
No, we're not.
We're just pushing it back to the building department to deal with.
That's correct.
So to me, it's cut and dry, simple.
Gary, do you have anything further on that?
No, I just, again, I thought that this should be precedential, if you will, generic and
Well, I-
precedential, and not specific to this applicant, to make things easier going forward when another HOA comes before us,
Right.
if
Well,
they were to ask for the same
Well, the
thing.
The
decision.
decision doesn't say this homeowners association. It says a homeowners
Right,
association.
it is generic.
Thank you.
So do I have a motion to
So we'll
approve the,
remove all of the language from the top of page 8 under the heading, Planning Board Conditions of Approval, down through the heading at the bottom of that page called Decision. If that's,
the
is that the
final few
modification I hear?
paragraphs before where it says decision? Everyone see that? Joe, you see that?
I have the original one.
Yeah, do,
Yeah.
do,
Yeah,
okay.
I see it.
You understand, Andrew?
Yep.
Okay, so everyone understands. So if we remove that language, do I have a motion to? Say that
Yeah, there
again?
was a motion to
There is a
approve
motion
and then a
and a second.
discussion.
Oh, I'm
so-
sorry. Okay, so we need to withdraw the motion, the original motion for the.
I'll withdraw the
decision.
original motion and make a motion that we accept the decision with the changes that we discussed.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Joe, how do you vote?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
I'll make that change and send it back to you for signature.
All right, thank you.
All right, now we just motion to alter it. We have to motion to accept the interpretation that it's going to have, right?
I assumed it was all in one, that you
No,
were
I.
going to approve
I
it
had-
in the modified
I think I
form.
had said that it was,
All right.
and the decision.
I stand corrected, Kevin.
I think so. Okay, public hearings. We have some changes this evening. The Shops of Woodbury is postponed until next month, carried over till next month, public hearing. Since it was on the agenda, is there anyone here who wanted to speak to that? Okay.
It's not a public hearing. On Kumar?
No.
She's
Shops
on
of
the
Woodbury.
Shops of Woodbury.
I thought we were going to Kumar first.
No, I was
no.
just up to.
Okay.
Woodview Heights is also carried over to next month at their request. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to that application? Okay, so Shops of Woodbury and Woodbury Heights will be next month.
I'll make a motion, we extend their public hearing to May
9th?
9th.
Second?
I'll
Second.
it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so public hearings for Shops of Woodbury and Woodview Heights will be in May. May 9th is our next meeting. I'd also like to make a change. We have Pulver and Kumar. I'd like to do Kumar before Pulver because it's rather quick. Kumar is review request by the applicant for the extension of variance granted to permit the construction of a new single-family dwelling. Said vacant property is located in the R2A zoning district on Campbell Avenue. Private road in Highland Mills is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 216, Block 7, Lots 2, 3, 13, and 14. I believe this is an extension for a soil test, which couldn't be conducted because of the weather conditions. We have the applicant's representative here. Please state your name for the record.
J. Myro, Bluestein, Shapiro, Rich, and Barone. For the applicant, I sent the letter in.
Yes, you did.
This was an approval granted, a variance granted, and I think the decision was ultimately dated January 10.
Yep.
I think we had presented to the board that in order for us to get a building permit, we were going to have to do soil testing that related to the size of the building and all that stuff. I confirmed with Gary Thomasberger that the day I wrote that letter, that not only didn't he do our soil testing since January, he hasn't done any soil testing, it was precluded by the weather. So we're asking for an additional extension to allow us to fulfill the conditions under there through no fault of our own. We just couldn't get any soil testing done.
All right. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak to this? Row one, row two, three, four? Do I need to close the public hearing?
It wasn't really a public hearing, was it?
Oh, it was just, okay, so what do we want to do? We decide now, or do we
Somebody gotta
decide
make
at
a-
the end?
have any questions?
I think you
Does
can
the board have any?
Yeah,
Somebody's
does the
gotta make
board
a
have any?
motion.
Oh, I can update you. There was one other condition, just so you know. There was one other condition that we offered to join the homeowners, the road maintenance, the existing road maintenance agreement. And I had drafted a letter, I drafted a proposed agreement, I ran it by Mr. Donnelly, and I believe the chair looked at it. We mailed that out to all the owners on the street who had property or lots. And the only, I think it was 10 or 12 mailings, the only person I heard from was Abraham Malik. I have heard from nobody else, and it's been at least probably a month.
Are we here just for the soil testing?
I just
So
wanted
we
to
can't-
bring
For
you-
that
I-
purpose, yeah. There's
Yes.
a backup condition to that, which would
Right.
require the recording of an obligation signed by your client only to abide by it and to
Right.
join in the sharing. if you
I
can't
only,
get
I
people-
just wanted to update the board on that.
My suggestion would be, if you're inclined to extend this, since the original approval duration was 90 days, that you grant something similar, meaning to your July meeting.
So if
There's no
we-
problem with doing it
So
now
do
rather than
they
later.
need to come back in July to tell us? or
Well, they won't need
to-
to come back at all if they get everything done, but if they need a further extension, they'd need to come back.
Well, if this is for soil testing, well,
The
my
the
personal
condition-
opinion is I'm inclined
Yeah.
only to give a 90-day extension because
Yeah.
there won't be any snow in July,
Right.
hopefully.
No, we're prepared to move forward now that we can.
All right.
I have a question, John.
Yes, Joe, go ahead.
Sir,
Yes,
Mr. Kumar still owns this, right?
as far as I know, yes.
All right. Yet there was an individual that was interested in purchasing it at the meeting the last time you were here.
They were actually in contract at the time. They still are, to my knowledge.
All right, well, in the decision, and number two, it said a revised map showing constellation of 4 lots filed with the Orange County Real Property Tax Service Agency. So, has there been any movement as far as the person actually purchasing this for Mr. Kumar? Why does Mr. Kumar still own it?
Because the contract was contingent upon the buyer being able to build on the house and to obtain a building permit. We can't do that until we do the soil testing. So the contingency's been pushed out, considering the weather. The contingency's been pushed out. I'm assuming if the soils don't test at all and nothing can be built, the contract will fall. But right now, the seller and the buyer agreed that the closing would not occur until after a building permit was issued. That's my understanding of it. So we have to do the soil testing. Mr. Kumar will then sell. At that point, the buyer will own it. He'll combine the lots, fulfill the final conditions.
It can be done until all that consolidation is done, if I read the material correctly.
We can't get a CO until the lots are combined.
The condition requires that they consolidate those lots and record a deed to evidence that with the Orange County Clerk, and they won't get any building permit till they do that.
All right, that's what I thought it said. So that has to preclude any building starting on the lot, correct?
I'm sure that that's the position Gary will take, yes.
And we have no problem with that.
Anyone else on the board have anything to say? Do I have a motion? Do I need to make a motion?
Your meeting is July 11th. You may want to extend it to that date.
So how do we extend, I've never done an extension.
So it would be a motion to extend the variance approval to July 11th, 2018. You would need a second and a majority vote.
Okay, do I have a motion to extend the variance till the July 11th
I'll make that motion.
meeting? Do I have a second? I second it. How do you vote, Joe?
How many days?
90,
That's roughly 93 months.
90 days.
I vote aye.
Aye.
Kevin?
No.
Andrew?
No.
Aye. So a 90-day extension has been granted till July?
Yes.
Okay. All right, next public hearing is for Pulver for an area variance to permit the proposed use of a farm winery, whereas pursuant to Section 310-39.1B, winery access must be to a New York State Route 32, and applicant proposes access through Quaker Road, which is a village road, and Ice House Road, which is a private road. Said property is located in the R1A zoning district at 14 Castleton Drive in Highland Mills and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 202, Block 1, Lot 70 and 79. The applicant is here. Would you please state your name and, for the record, and tell us exactly what you would like to do?
Madam Chairwoman, excuse me, can I
Yes.
ask you one question?
Sure.
Is this language accurate that says the application for an area variance to permit a proposed use? What am I not understanding
An
about
area-
that? In other words, isn't it a
Because
question
it's-
for a
it's-
proposed use, a
it's-
use variance?
It's an allowed,
No, I'm saying, the language, doesn't that
oh,
mean it's a use
for
variance?
an area variance.
Well, I think the idea is the use can only be carried out if it has access to, in this case, Route 32. The
Thank you.
use is clearly
The
allowed under the
winery is
code.
allowed
It's
in
not,
that.
make it clear, this is not a use variance.
No, it
No,
is
it's not
not.
a use.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Jay Myro, Bluestein, Shapiro, Rich, and Barone. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I'm here with Seth Pulver, who lives and operates and maintains the property. This is an application for an area variance. It's, the section of the code for which we're looking for a variance from is 301-31.1B. The property in question is section block and lot 202-1-70 and 79. Mr. Pulver purchased the property in 2002. It's my understanding that the property is quite well-known in the town and the village. It's the Rushmore Estate. It was built in 1908 by the Rushmore family, and it's had some historical significance over the years. At this time, Mr. Pulver, the property has approximately close to 50 acres, and the buildings are on the site. Mr. Pulver would like to develop a farm winery as defined in your code and as permitted in this zoning district. You have particular regulations in your zoning law, and there's essentially 4 requirements for establishing a farm winery. One is that the winery must obtain a license from New York State to conduct a farm winery. The actual winemaking area and facility is limited to 4,000 square feet or less, and that area may include a wine tasting facility. There's Section D, which references structures of local or national historic or architectural significance, suggesting that those properties are actually quite favorable, would be favorable for this type of use. The 4th requirement is the one that we don't meet, which is that the winery access is to be off of State Route 32. So it turns out that the access to the proposed access to the farm winery is off a private road that Mr. Pulver owns, which is Ice House Road. And Ice House Road enters and exits off of Quaker Road, which is a town road. Quaker Road happens to be 450 feet from Route 32. So, this matter was presented to, a proposed site plan was submitted to the planning board. The planning board designated themselves lead agency under seeker with a coordinated review. And we were referred to the ZBA for consideration of an area variance for this particular purpose. Because, and I think I'll let Mike advise the board, but it's my understanding that because this board cannot act as in a coordinated review without a negative declaration from the planning board, we're here to get some guidance from you as to whether it would be beneficial for us to proceed with the cost and expense of proceeding with the planning board. And I'll let Mike explain how this typically works.
Yeah, let me amplify what Mr. Morrow is saying. When multiple agencies have approval authority over a single action, here, there's a site plan approval required for the farm winery, and there's a variance determination from you. There could be approvals required by the health department or other agencies. When that happens, the preferred course under the SEQRA, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, is coordinated review, meaning that one of those various agencies that has approval authority act as the lead agency and make all the necessary determinations. The planning board has determined or designated itself the lead agency, but they have not yet acted under SEQRA, either by issuing a negative declaration, which would close out the process, or a positive declaration and an environmental impact statement. The law is, once there is coordinated review in a lead agency, no individual agency can take a final action until SEQRA is closed out. So while you can open the public hearing, hear from the public, discuss the matter, ask questions of the applicant, give them guidance, as Mr. Meyer was asked, you cannot take action on this proposal until after the planning board closes out SEQRA, so we'll have to hear from them on that score. Karen has also mentioned to me that the notices may not have been received by some of the neighbors until last Friday. We can certainly continue the hearing to another date and make sure we announce that tonight, so those people will have an opportunity to come back and speak later.
All right, so I'll first apologize that I didn't come with an easel to put up this picture here, and I didn't tell the public there is a copy of the site plan here if you'd like to come up and take a look at it. All right, so I guess I'll go through the 5 criteria for an area variance here, just to tell you what my thoughts are and what our position is in regards to those. The first one is whether this variance will have an adverse effect upon the neighborhood or the character of the surrounding area. We're 450 feet short of being off of 32. From the base of Ice House Road, if you look down towards, you can see the intersection. It's not a particularly long shot. In between Ice House Road and where it intersects with 32, there is one driveway. So if the concern is traffic, it's not like we're impacting a whole bunch of people. Typically, I would not expect that a farm winery is going to create a tremendous amount of traffic. If the planning board's concerned about that, obviously, we would do a traffic study, but I don't think this particular use is going to cause that significant an impact. If it would, there's literally one driveway that's affected between the two. Whether the granting the variance would have an adverse effect on the environment, no. I mean, it's a permitted use. We're using the driveway exactly for what the permitted use is. Is there another feasible way for us to accomplish this without a variance? No, we can't. We have no other way of accessing 32 without the variance. Is it substantial? I would say that a distance that's basically the equivalent of 1.5 football fields is not really a significant distance. As I said, what exists between the two, between 32 and the driveway and Ice House Road is one driveway. I would say that it's not substantial in that regard. And whether it's self-created, Mr. Pulver bought this with the farm regulations in effect at the time, so it is self-created. But I would remind the board that that criteria alone cannot be relied on solely to deny a variance request. I'll mention one more thing. Ice House Road is a private road. There are a number of houses that enter onto Ice House Road. I'm guessing there's some people here who enter upon that. Those people have been maintaining Ice House Road on their own. And I believe, is there a gate? There's a, okay. All right, so what Mr. Pulver's proposed and has reached out to his neighbors, that in the event he is able to establish this use, he will take over the entire maintenance with no contribution from any of those owners and will maintain Ice House Road at his own expense. So are there any questions I can answer?
I have a question. My first one that comes to mind is if Mr. Pulver owns the road now, why are the homeowners footing the bill for the maintenance of it?
I think that's just, he doesn't use the road.
Generally, when you have an easement across someone else's property, the default is, without any other agreement, that those using that easement area are responsible to maintain it for their use, and they can't interfere with the owner's obligation. If the owner was also using it, then he realistically would have to share in that obligation.
I'll rephrase my response, is that to the best of my knowledge, he doesn't use it. There's another entrance onto the property through Brigadoon, yeah, on the top of the property, he uses that entrance, to my knowledge.
But now the Ice House Road, once you get past those 4 or 5 houses there, is that wide enough for people to pass safely?
That's an issue we'll have to address with the plan. That's a planning issue, and we'll have to address that with planning. Make sure that, we'll have to satisfy to them that it's sufficient for emergency vehicles and for ingress and egress.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I have a copy that I received in my mailbox of the minutes of the Woodbury Planning Board meeting for April 9, 2003. And this was when Mr. Brodsky was still involved with this. And to the best of my knowledge, there was something about 2 smaller lots that the houses he had designed were not fit on and so forth. But if you will bear with me and allow me to read this, it says, Mr. Brodsky explained that this was to be the subject of an agenda item for next month's meeting. However, he wanted to give the board a brief overview of what he would be asking them for. He said that within Brigadoon, there are several pieces of land that were not included as part of the subdivision. People are now trying to sell this land and have offered it to Mr. Brodsky. He went on to explain that by purchasing this land, he would have enough money to subdivide it into 5 lots by right. However, if the land was allowed to be added to a portion of the development that was clustered, there would be more open space. He would then abandon cul-de-sac C5 and give the property to the respective property owners of lots 8 and 9. This would allow for the permanent closure of Ice House Road. So,
That's from 2000, I have no clue what that is. I have zero clue.
it's just, there is that big substantial gate above the last house from the bottom up to Ice House Road. So it does look like somebody attempted, I mean, that is a stout gate. I mean, my goodness, I mean, you couldn't drive a car through that. So, it does look like there was an attempt by someone for more than, just like up the upper part of it, Mr. Pulver, you have a chain across it. So that would have sufficed down there as well if you only wanted people not using it as a thoroughfare or something like that. This is a regular sliding gate, that it looks like it was an attempt to close it off. So I'm curious as to whether it was actually ever closed off permanently, as it says here in the planning board minutes.
I'm completely, I have no idea what happened in 2003 and
And the
what
road was
Mr.
never closed off.
If that offer to close the roadway was incorporated into some planning board condition of approval, then the planning board will let us know about it. But your issue here is simply whether or not you will consider granting a variance from the requirement that access be directly to Route 32. Certainly, the adequacy of that road is an issue for both the planning board and for you, because some part of the rationale for that condition must be the assurance of adequate access to the road. But whether or not it was actually closed, was required to be closed, those are issues we should hear from the planning board on. And since they're gonna have to review the site plan approval, I'm sure that will be front and center before them.
What is the width of the right of way? It must have a deeded width to it, and the property owners that use it of, 12 feet, 17 feet, whatever it is.
I think it varies along the whole way, the measurements are
Well,
on
not
the survey.
the actual state of the road, but what the actual legal width of the road is. I don't believe it says it on the plat.
Well, Mr. Pulver owns it. He could certainly widen it to any width that he chose or the planning board required.
Yeah, but it does have the properties alongside
Right.
that have
What
lines
rights
as
do they
well,
have?
so-
Yeah, we'd have
That
to
was
see
my-
those easements to
that was
find
my
out
question.
what rights of use they have, whether it's defined by course or just by reference to the existing road, on a subdivision map or a survey or something of the kind. Jay, can you get those
I don't
documents
have,
to us?
yeah,
I don't mean
have.
tonight, but.
All right, so the meet.
We would like to know,
There's
if there is a
entire
meets and bounds.
There's an entire meets and bounds for the road, so everybody who fronts on that has access over that,
that defined
has
area.
an access
All right.
easement over that. But I think in our meets and, it would be in our meets and bounds as to what the actual dimensions.
Well, you could make it anything you wanted, but the question is, what right over what width of access do the individual lot owners have a right?
They have a right over from Quaker Road up to the end of the last lot.
Right, and what's the width of that area?
Well, it's by meets and bounds and it varies. There's no set width.
Maybe you could call out on your plans what it is,
It's
that-
on the site plan. It's the actual.
but are there call-outs for what the widths are at those various locations?
Okay, so you wanna know the narrowest?
Yeah, how about the narrowest and the widest?
Well, right now, just remember that, I think at the narrowest point that I'm looking at, that's actually a part of the road that's, servicing, the lots that front, so I'm assuming it's significant. I'll get you the dimension.
Okay.
I'll get you the dimension.
I have just a few more.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Mr. Pulver, I don't know how large the vineyard would be, but do you have some idea of whether that vineyard would be enough to produce all the wine that you need to sell? Or would you be getting additional grapes and/or some kind of stock to enhance that? I know, I believe I have heard that in New York State, you're allowed to be like a little winery, and you can bring in stuff from other places to help you fulfill it if you don't have the vineyard to,
Yeah.
sustain that whole thing.
Yes, you're allowed.
So you would be bringing stuff in?
Well, the vines themselves take 3 to 5 years to mature and produce grapes. And the law does say that in that time, or even after that, I'm allowed to bring in grapes to make the wine on the premises there. So that is something that's allowed. And I'm sure I will be doing that in the beginning before I produce my own grapes.
Is your intention to reduce the
My intention is-
grapes as you bring in? Is it your intention to reduce, come speak over here?
Yes, my intention is
As the
to,
crops come in?
exactly,
Okay.
yeah. I'd like to produce as much grapes as possible on that property.
And how would the grapes be transported up to the place where they would be pressed into wine?
That would probably be the farm tractor that I would need.
No, that's from the vineyard. I'm talking about the ones that are bought in.
Oh, I imagine those are trucked in.
And that would come up Ice House Road as well?
If required on the site plan, yes.
How else would they get there?
There's other roads that access the property.
But that's not what we're agreeing to.
Right.
You're talking about bringing up Brigadier Boulevard and up Castleton and then down the upper end of Ice House.
It's our intention that Ice House Road will be this, will cover all, yeah, I don't want to, okay, I misspoke. Ice House Road is intended to be the only road that will handle all vehicular traffic for the needs of the farm winery.
Okay, I have a question on your environmental form. One of the questions says, will the proposed action result in a substantial increase in traffic above present levels? You wrote no. How is that possible if you're opening a winery? How would there not be significantly more traffic?
I mean, that's a legitimate point. We'll address it. The planning board's going to make the determination on that. If we have to modify that, we will, but it's a good point.
Wait a minute, modify what?
The answer to that question, if in
But
fact
that
there will
won't
be a
modify the
traffic.
traffic. That will just
Pardon?
modify,
You're saying that you don't think the answer is correct?
correct.
Right. If it's not correct, we will amend the EAF.
Okay. So then you would say that, yes.
The planning
it would
board's clearly gonna
substantially
yeah.
increase traffic.
Right, the planning board's clearly going to ask us that question, and we're going to either have to prove it out with a traffic study, or the board will be satisfied with whatever other data we can provide.
And how do you propose, if Ice House Road is used, it's a rather narrow road, you plan to widen it, you said, possibly? It's,
Only-
it's narrow in places, I mean, I can't imagine a car coming down, car coming up, they're unfamiliar with the area, where are they gonna go? In somebody's driveway, turn around? I don't think the neighbors would appreciate that.
No, well, it will be widened to the extent that we can widen it, and to the extent that we'll have to show in order to justify the use.
Okay.
Karen, I have a follow-up to that, if that's okay?
Sure. Go
What-
ahead, Gary.
Can you state it this way, please? How would you propose to improve Ice House Road to accommodate all of the traffic and accesses that the rest of the board members have already mentioned? What is your proposal?
Are you talking in terms of its physical condition or its width?
Everything.
That is. part
Well,
of the
certainly,
physical-
certainly the
Just
planning,
tell me
the planning
what-
board is going to indicate on the site plan exactly what condition we are going to have to bring the road up to, if it's in substandard condition now. They will specify exactly what we have to do. And if the widths are not if the existing widths are not sufficient and we can widen them, to the extent we can widen them, we will agree to widen them.
You know, you're asking for a variance, but yet you're telling us that the planning board's gonna make the determination on that. I wanna know what's gonna happen with Ice House Road before I consider agreeing to give a variance.
Yeah, Kevin's right. If in fact the town
I
engineer
don't
is
care
going
what
to
the
tell you
planning
what to
board
do.
does. I
we need
wanna
to
be
know that.
comfortable
The
in my
variance,
shoes.
the variance is requested is whether or not we can get to Ice House Road from 32, and whether
I
that's
wanna know
considered.
what's gonna be done with Ice
Okay.
House
I can
Road.
tell. I'll tell you, Kevin. I plan on widening it as much as necessary, which in some areas is not even to the width of the property that's there, so I don't want to intrude on the neighbors' properties unless I absolutely have to. So I want to widen it to the minimum amount to allow the traffic to get back and forth both ways. I want to redo the whole surface with item 4 and roll it and create pitch towards drainage culverts on either side of the road, which if you saw the road and its conditions now, is some major upgrades.
And the only other thing I have, Karen, is, I know the vines are gonna be, and don't get me wrong, I know nothing about wine except drinking it. But the property does back up against Highland Woods or Scaglione Court.
Well, there is a forever green space in between,
But
and
there's no environmental, what about, is there spraying, is there bees, is there bugs, I'm just curious, I
oh,
mean,
those are good questions. I mean, there are definitely issues with growing grapes, like any farm operation, and
I
there
wouldn't
are.
want Scaglione Court people to be put out.
No, I also plan, and the way I situated the building and the vines themselves, I am doing my best to be as considerate as I can to all of my neighbors and bringing everything away from them into the center of my property, so that.
But by looking at the map, though, it was like right up against the property line almost, except for the buffer.
Maybe the vines, but certainly
Yeah.
not the building and where everything else is, and he might have outlined where the vines.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see you put like 10 beehives out there.
No, I don't,
I mean, I don't even know if that's what you need to do.
no, you don't need that for pollination.
Let me just note that those are all valid issues, but I think they're primarily planning board issues. Let me give you an example.
I know they're planning board issues, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But if I'm gonna vote yes, I want to be clear in my head that the planning board don't come to us and get it, and then go back to them after the fact. I want to know ahead of time.
Oh, no, you're not going to act until the planning board closes out those issues. I guess my only comment was if Ice House Road went directly to Route 32, they wouldn't be here. So really, the concentration is on whether or not allowing access on the between street, between the Ice House Road, which is essentially their driveway, and Quaker Road to 32 is something you'd bury. And certainly, the project overall has concerns that need to be voiced. If part of your concern is whether or not the cars and perhaps trucks delivering grapes can maneuver through that roadway system to make that, that's fair enough. You may want to ask whether they have traffic counts that are of similar size farm wineries. New York is known to have a lot of them now, and get an idea what kind of,
We have a winery in town already.
okay, yeah, I think you have two, right, don't you?
No,
Just
I
one?
know of one.
Okay.
Unless you know of one, Michael.
No, no, no. I'm like Kevin, I just drink this stuff.
But, you know, they're trying to get, they don't want to go forward unless they think the ZBA is going to be in favor of this project.
Well, I think they're hearing your concern, that unless you're convinced that this alternative method of getting to Route 32, coming off Ice House Road onto a village road, then go into 32, unless you're satisfied that that can handle the projected traffic that they will have, both the deliveries as well as the tourists and the drinkers,
And I'd like to
I
hear
think they're hearing that you wouldn't be inclined to grant the variance, so they have their homework for them. I'm not
And I'd
putting
like
words
to
in your
hear
mouth,
what
I think
the,
that's what I'm hearing.
What the public has to say
Sure.
about it.
When did Mr. Pulver purchase Ice House Road?
2002.
Who owned it before that?
It was part of the whole property that I purchased in 2002.
Part of the Rushmore
Correct.
estate? And those houses that exist on Ice House now, they existed prior to '02?
Two of them, prior to
Oh,
'02, yes,
yeah.
they all existed
Okay,
prior to '02.
thank you.
Some of them have been there a long time.
Any further discussion from the board or questions at this time?
No, I'd like to
Okay,
hear
I'd-
from.
yeah, I'd like to open it up to the public to see if anybody would like to comment or ask or whatever in row one. Second row? Third row? First row? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, please come to the, yes, go and give us your name.
Yeah.
Yes, introduce yourself.
Is the mic on, dear?
Hello? Yeah.
It's on.
Okay. My name is Liza Rodriguez. I live on Ice House Road right now. I've been living there since about 4 years. And the reason we moved there is for quietness. The road is very narrow. It only allows one car. And we have to actually move into, a neighbor's driveway in order for somebody to pass. There's not a lot of traffic right now, of course, because there's only 6 houses that live there right now, 6 houses on the property. I'm not in favor of the winery. The amount of traffic and worrying about drunk drivers on the property, it's not lit. And in some areas, they may seem that they can open up the driveway a little more, but there's telephone poles and there's neighbors' properties. There is a turn that's a blind spot. You gotta go real slow in order to, not bump into anybody coming down. So, what else? The amount of trucks that might go on that road. The road, it's gonna have to be maintained way more often. Just the amount of traffic alone at nighttime, on the weekends especially. It's gonna be rough for the houses that live on Ice House Road and also on Quaker Road, because the people could be coming from Quaker Road from Pepe and Eddie's. They could be coming from that way. They could be coming from 32, so it's just gonna be tons of traffic. And it's gonna be bad for Highland Woods and, the neighboring communities. It's gonna be a lot more traffic. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. In the second row, anybody? Third row? Oh, second row? Go ahead. I'm sorry, sir. Didn't see you. Lost my-
My name's Christopher Perino, Highland Lake Estates, Highland Mills. I'm looking at the map here, and I know people both on Highland Woods Boulevard over Scaglione Court you're talking about, I believe, and also in Brigadoon. And this meeting is for just the issue of coming in off of 32 onto Quaker Road, if I'm correct in saying that?
Correct, and using Ice House Road as the
And
entrance to
using
the
Ice House
winery.
Road. Well,
Correct.
I feel for both the homeowners there and the owner who wants to turn this into a winery, but I think the concern here is more of the approaching on 32 to get to Ice House Road. Now, that's great if you're traveling north on 32, but if you're coming south on 32, how are they supposed to make that turn into Quaker Road? It's a very sharp turn.
It is.
And anybody that's used it, and I've used it for customers, family, and friends on both sides of this property, and I don't have a problem with the project at this point. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of questions that the planning board's gonna have to handle. And I do feel for the residents that live on Ice House Road, which that also affects them. But if we're talking just about Quaker Road here, something's gonna have to be done about that turn, because that's gonna be a dangerous turn. Now, as people are coming out of Quaker Road heading into town, okay, that's a very tough turn to look over your shoulder. So now you gotta start thinking of traffic both directions coming, and I think that's a pretty dangerous point. So I think a traffic study or something should be done right there before we even continue up Ice House Road. It's just my opinion.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the second row? Third row? Last row? Anyone else in the, oh, yes, go ahead, sir.
This is the guy that wrote that, brought in that article.
John Cookless, Ice House Road. I live at the last house up against that fence, and I was under the assumption that Ice House Road was supposed to be closed whenever the gentleman here, Devenuto, read that letter. It was a deal with those two lots, 8 and 9, that are up at the top of Ice House Road. And that if that was approved, then Ice House Road would be closed at the gate there. I wanted to submit more information, but I was just notified, and I think most of my neighbors were just notified on Friday of this meeting. So I have other information that I'd like to submit.
And you can, and if you bring that over to the building department, they will enter it into the record, and we'll get that before the next meeting.
Okay, will this meeting stay open then?
Yes,
Oh,
because
okay.
we can't close it till the planning board.
Okay, I'll be
Completes.
back.
All righty, thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak to this at this time? Anyone on the board have any further questions right now?
I have a question for the applicant.
Okay.
The other winery in town seems to, again, I'm paraphrasing, but they seem to have events to draw in clientele, whether they be tastings or music or whatever it may be. Can you comment on, at this point, the likelihood of that happening or your intent to do that?
Well, the intent is he's going to have the tasting room, he'll have events relating to the tasting of wine, and whatever other events are permitted that are associated with a farm winery. So, I mean, I don't have an exhaustive list of what's permitted. I'm assuming that you have one other winery?
Yeah,
Yes.
Alea Winery
Okay.
on 32.
And what, if there's I'm not quite sure what,
Well, Pelea advertises musical events, which I assume draw in,
I'm assuming. they're
people,
per-
clients,
I'm
whatever.
assuming they're permitted as
I'll
farm
assume that
winery
too.
use.
I don't know
Well,
otherwise.
I
but-
I would assume that Seth would consider any kind of events that are permitted.
Seth, is that, I mean, do you at this point in time intend to do that type of thing, or you don't know at this point?
Well, my focus happens to be now on the biology of growing the grapes. I'm enrolled in a course right now to become certified to make wine and grow grapes. So that is my thrust, but as Mr. Myro said, I do need to make a living somehow up there, and I'm not sure what I'm gonna have to do to bring customers in, but certainly if it's a permitted use, I would like the option to do it.
Perhaps what would be helpful is if you could put together a written narrative of the scope of how you propose to operate the farm
A business
winery.
plan.
I think that would be helpful, perhaps to the planning board, but to this board, to make sure you include aspects of, are you going to have buses, minivans, the trucks that will bring grapes in, and how that impacts getting from Route 32 to Ice House Road, because that's really the thrust of the variance request here. Ice House Road, as I said before, is your driveway. It could, if it accessed Route 32 directly, be used for the entire access, and would be up to the planning board to determine if that was adequate or it needed to be widened. But you're not just using Ice House Road. You're not on a state highway. You're using a village street in between. That means two intersections, two directions you could go. If you've talked to the DOT, it might be helpful to get their feedback and what they think of that. I think those are the issues that are valid for the zoning board. You're going to have to present similar information to the planning board. But those that impact on the ingress and egress across the Quaker Road from 32 to Ice House Road are the most important.
Now, is the house gonna be involved in this? The ballroom and,
No, I plan on building a separate facility for it.
Yeah, I saw that on the map. Any further comments from the board?
Just
Go
a
ahead.
comment, I agree with Kevin that it's very difficult to give them direction at this point without having the full information and feedback from the lead agency.
Right, well, I think Mike told them more about the traffic, you need to address,
Listen, we can either go back to the planning board and have further discussions there and consult with their professionals, or we can put together a new package with traffic information, scope of use, and bring it back to you next month.
Well, their
Well, see
issues
if
are
we
much
answer any
broader,
questions.
but their,
Right, we-
their issues are broader, but you got overlap here, and those that
Yeah,
affect.
I agree with that.
but I think they've
agree.
already know our
Issues.
concerns.
right, but they need to address them.
Well, no, let them go back and address them with the planning board. Don't, because we're not gonna give them a thumbs up or not, so.
You're
Before
talking
they go
about
back
this-
to the planning
Right,
board.
right.
I'm a little confused now. So, obviously, you want to know the types of vehicles that are going to be going up and down
Right,
Ice
the
House Road.
types,
Is it going to be
the-
buses, trucks,
The time,
cars? What width can we build the road to? Is it going to be sufficient to support those vehicles? What will be the anticipated increase in traffic on Quaker Road and Ice House Road?
correct.
The hours a day of the traffic, what kind of vehicles?
Sure,
Are there going to be
okay.
buses and minivans brought in, or just individual car owners?
Right, so.
Maybe a schematic of those intersections, the turning radius, how you get access to 32.
All right, so here's where I'm a little confused. We go back to the planning board, we prove all of that out to their satisfaction. Does this board have other concerns regarding coming off of 32 for the particular of this variance, those 450 feet? I don't want to have to go back, spend all the money, prove out all of those issues to what you would think is right, then come back and say, we still have a problem with the 450 feet.
You're asking us to presume that we understand what the completion of secra would be. How can you even comment on stuff like that without understanding where secra goes?
Because I'm using this scenario, because we have a significant expense here to go through. And the question is, will the board, will you know enough if we pass secra? The question is the 450 feet the most significant issue here? And whether we can prove out all those other things, are we still going to have a problem with the 450 feet?
Do you want us to decide on that tonight?
I don't want you
sir?
to decide, you can't decide tonight, but you
Are
could
you
say to
asking,
us.
Jay, that if they satisfied all of the concerns that related to the access from 32 and across Quaker to Ice House Road to their satisfaction, would there be any other issues that would prevent them from voting in favor of the variance?
Right, well, basically.
Yeah, there could be. I'm gonna check into a little bit more about this, of closing of Ice House Road when they approved Brigadoon.
Well, that's
That would
certainly,
have had to
Yeah, I
have
didn't
been
know
within,
anything
that
about
would have
that.
had to have been within our chain of title, and I'll get a
I
title
mean,
report.
that's something that might be moot to the whole project to begin with, if that road was closed as a condition of getting Brigadoon passed.
Yeah,
certainly,
yeah,
if it was a
absolutely.
planning board condition of approval, we would want to know about it.
So
Is Rushmore State part of Brigadoon?
it was.
No, I know, But is it
Original.
considered, it's not, it's a separate, you know, you're basically surrounded by Brigadoon, okay.
I'm not part of the homeowners association.
Gotcha, okay.
So that, Mr. DiVenuto, that was, what you read from was from 2003?
Oh, give me a second.
Yeah, and there's a letter in the paper about the same thing. This gentleman in the back there brought it in.
Was that,
Right, but we
did that
didn't get
involve a planning board?
It was
Yeah.
the
It was from 2003.
Woodbury Planning Board meeting, April 9th, 2003.
And did
This
it, was the
January
applicant,
2003.
was this property the subject of the hearing?
Well, it was all part of the original
As I
project.
understand it, there's 2 lots that are subdivided on your property, Mr. Pulver, am I correct?
The entire property is actually made up of 3 lots, the large lot.
But there's 2 subdivision, like, small lots, I think one was 2.7 acres, it was on the plat,
Correct,
all right?
and 7.2.
One of those plus the other one was, my understanding was the reason for the permanent closure of Ice House Road. If Mr. Brodsky got those 2 lots included, with whatever plans he had at that time, I really don't know the particulars to that degree, that Ice House would be closed, Ice House Road would be
Did
closed.
Mr.
That's-
Brodsky own this property?
At 2003, I had.
No, you owned it.
Yeah, that was never discussed.
How could they have bound Mr.?
Well, that's what we gotta find out about.
That,
I
that's
wanna
my
know-
understanding of it, I don't really know.
Okay, we can check that. So the choice right now is it gonna be beneficial to this board for us to come back with as much information as we can come back with before we head over? I would
One of the
prefer to-
questions, Jay,
Well,
that
we-
you spoke about was the distance from the intersection of Quaker and 32 to the intersection of Quaker and Ice House. And I personally would want to or need to hear, in order to approve that, I would need to hear from a traffic consultant or the town's traffic engineer that that distance, those intersections and that entire distance was safe. Not just traffic counts. I don't want to know how many cars go on it now. I want to know that it is deemed safe for the worst-case vehicles that would be on it, such as buses and trucks. I want to hear
Buses and trucks are already using-
Listen to me. I want to hear a declaration from a traffic, it's just me, a declaration from a traffic engineer that those intersections, that distance is safe for the greatest sized vehicle that would be on it. And since you can't say that a bus wouldn't be on it going up after Ice House Road were improved, assuming it were improved, that I want to know, that the gentleman brought up the fact that that intersection is challenging. I want to see the words "safe" in a traffic report.
You want, are you talking, I'm not clear, are you talking about Ice House Road, or are you talking about the intersection of
Route 32 and Quaker.
Quaker
entire
and Route
distance.
32
You're asking us-
and Ice House and
The entire
Quaker.
distance that Mike was referring to.
So
which
you're
was-
asking us to prove out that Ice House, that 32 is safe for the travel of a bus?
No.
To turn on
No.
the Quaker.
Quaker
Turn on
is
north and
at
south.
quite an angle to 32.
You know,
The
to be
code
honest with
requires
you,
the
Karen,
direct access. You're coming now from Route 32, then across the Village Road, then to Ice House Road.
Karen,
Question is, can you show that from a sight distance point of view and a turning radius point of view,
Quite honestly.
that series of configuration of intersections is adequate? I think that's what the board wants to
Right.
hear.
Not just adequate, Mike, but
I-
safe.
I'd be
I want
honest,
to hear the word "safe."
I'll be honest with you, and I think in the future we should think about this. If there's gonna be, we need to get a seeker or whatever from the planning board, we should not allow them in front of the ZBA until that's complete. Because they want us to give them, know whether they should spend any more money. And I'm not gonna say that now.
We
But
really.
One of the things that secret is about is for other agencies to have input into the process. So you're communicating through the applicant to the
So,
planning board as to what
and I
needs
don't
to
think
be
they should
addressed.
come
It's
here and try to
helpful.
put us on the spot before they decide to
All
spend
right.
more money moving forward. No offense, Seth.
No,
but-
listen, it's,
But you're putting us on the spot, and I'm not gonna do that now.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I agree.
well, can I just say that I don't disagree with that. I think the system is, it's a flaw in the system to require this board to tell me how they feel about this before they're entitled to vote. So I do agree with you on that. However, that's,
Tell them how we feel.
that's the system. And Mike will confirm that as many municipalities as he's worked in front of, and as many as I have, this is a constant problem, and it's not fair. It is not fair. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to him. So we're trying to make the best of what we can here, because you know that for us to proceed in front of the planning board, it's a significant expense. It's not little bits of dollars. So, you know, you're
But I think
always free to tell us, we're not gonna give you an opinion. I'm not asking you to do that, but I'm assuming you're free to do that. I'd like the opportunity to come back and provide as much as we can. And I appreciate it. I think all your comments are absolutely valid. So, and the concerns are valid, but we're stuck with a
Jay, what I
system.
think you're hearing is that this board is not inclined to make a decision
Okay,
until they have the kind of traffic study information that the planning board as lead agency would likely require.
okay.
They can't get more than what the planning board
All right, so
is
what
going to
we'll,
require.
I guess what we're gonna have to do is go back to the planning board, find out what their inclination is in terms of making us prove out these issues. So-
I'm thinking that we're having a big problem with the safety, the amount of traffic, the safety, the turning, the width of the road. There's so many things that if we were to vote tonight, I don't think you would get
We're
it.
not, you're not, we
Right, I
know you
but-
can't, so.
I know that, but you wanted to know how we felt.
All right, so, listen, I would hope that if we present as much empirical data as required to produce in front of the planning board, and not only do we pass muster with seeker, but we also present a sound, viable plan, this board's gonna give consideration to that one issue, giving full deference to our need to prove out that 32, that corner of 32 and Quaker is gonna be safe for buses, trucks, and vehicles going to the winery.
I'm leaving.
I think
And
we're
we
all
went
on the
both
same
directions.
page, if I said that correctly?
Yes,
Yep.
Okay.
not a guarantee.
Oh,
Are we allowed to?
that came across loud and clear.
With the
Do you want to
motion,
make a
I,
motion to continue?
The only reason I say that is because previously, my tenure on the planning board, the town of Woodbury's traffic engineer was disinclined to make that statement. I could not get her to say either way whether a particular roadway within the scope of an application was safe. She would not address the qualitative. She would only address the quantitative. I didn't move forward, but I'm just warning you
Yeah, that's a
that they
little-
don't like to address qualitative.
That's a little troublesome, because we're now probably going into town or village board territory, but, you know, I'm assuming all municipalities periodically review all of their roads, all of their intersections. You know what? If they don't make them safe, they got a big problem if there's an accident. This
No, but they
happened
made-
in Warwick,
but the-
which was County One.
but the village board has made a determination that farm wineries need to have direct access to Route 32.
Correct.
I assume for
For
both
a
safety
reason.
and public
Right.
protection.
Correct.
General health, safety, and welfare.
Right.
You're asking this board to vary that requirement, and they want to make sure that the roadway system, the alternative access way you propose, is safe. And I think that's the focus, that's the concern.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah,
if
I-
you're going back to the planning board, are we going to renotice this at some point in the future rather than continue it to May? Because you're not likely to get very far by May.
We'll renotice it.
So I think
Then I'll
you
make a
should leave the
motion.
heering open without
So
date.
we carry it open
But we'll
till it's
renotice at a
renoticed?
later date when
We'll
they're
leave it
ready to
open
return.
without date.
Without date. But they'll have to renotice later.
Can I,
No, I'm saying, it would be May though?
can I have a motion to do that?
I'll make a motion that we carry over the public hearing.
Without date to be
Without date.
renoticed in the future.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so until it's renoticed, I don't know when the next public hearing on this will be, but it's still open. So if you have any other materials to bring, have anything to say, or whatever, and hopefully you'll get your 10 days' notice instead of 3 or 4. All righty, thank you. Okay. Does everybody on the board read the building inspector's report that was in our mailbox? Okay, do I have a motion to accept?
I'll make that. Sorry, no, go ahead, please. No, please.
Okay,
I'll make that motion to accept the building inspector's report.
seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Karen, are we
Aye.
at all concerned about the items on that list that, where he doesn't know, or they didn't get back to him?
No.
He usually carries it over.
We don't care, right?
Oh, you mean the ones that he,
No
Yeah.
response.
he goes back? Okay, we had a motion to accept the building inspector's report, which was made by Andrew, seconded by Gary.
On the question,
No,
Joe.
Kevin, Joe?
Joe, no, somebody, not me.
and then on the question,
The question was on those items where,
Where it
he
says no,
missed,
yeah.
where there was
Yes.
no answer.
Answer, he goes back and he
Goes
does,
back.
yeah, it's never been an issue. All right, so we've accepted that. All right,
You all in favor?
All in favor?
oh, I did that. I thought we
Okay.
did. All in favor? Okay, it was accepted. We have no closed public hearings this evening. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. See you next month, May 9th. Thank you.